Hello, I'm Dilek Tuna. You're watching A News. Let's take a look at the top stories. Trump warns of further action against Iran as tensions rise over ceasefire breach claims, a seized ship and stalled talks. A powerful quake off northeast Japan triggers a tsunami warning. And Armenia's Prime Minister says economic ties with Azerbaijan could pave the way for lasting peace. Tensions in the Gulf are escalating further after a US operation at sea targets an Iranian-linked vessel. The move comes amid a fragile standoff with diplomacy under strain and the risk of further confrontation growing.
US military has taken control of an Iranian-flagged cargo ship after stopping it at sea. In a social media post, President Donald Trump said US forces disabled the vessel by blowing a hole in its engine room and now have full custody of the ship. The US Central Command later confirmed the operation and released video of the encounter. It said a US Navy destroyer, USS Spruance, intercepted the vessel, identified as the MV Tauska, in the North Arabian Sea. According to CENTCOM, the ship's crew failed to respond to repeated warnings over a 6-hour period. The destroyer then fired several rounds from its 5-inch deck gun into the vessel's engine room to stop it. US Marines later boarded the ship, which remains in American custody. Tracking data shows the ship had travelled from Port Klang in Malaysia and was heading toward the Iranian port of Bandar Abbas. The interception took place near key shipping lanes that connect to the Strait of Hormuz, one of the world's most important routes for oil transport. The incident comes during a period of heightened tension in the region. The United States has maintained a blockade on Iranian ports, while Iran has at times restricted traffic through the Strait of Hormuz. At the same time, diplomatic efforts appear to be faltering. The Islamic Republic news agency reports that Iran has rejected taking part in a second round of talks with the United States. The decision follows warnings from Washington that new strikes could be considered if a deal is not reached. President Trump said US representatives are expected to travel to Islamabad for proposed talks, describing the American offer as fair. However, Iran's refusal raises doubts about whether negotiations will move forward.
Uncertainty is growing around proposed talks between the United States and Iran as Tehran disputes reports of a new round of negotiations. With tensions still high and warnings continuing, questions remain over whether diplomatic efforts can move forward.
Iran has rejected as inaccurate announcements by the US officials as well as news reports about the date of upcoming round of negotiations on Tuesday in Pakistan, according to a state-owned IRNA news agency. On the eve of the reportedly scheduled talks, President Masoud Pezeshkian held a phone contact with Pakistani Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif on Sunday. They exchanged views on the latest regional developments, Islamabad negotiations, and developments related to the ceasefire, President's office reported. President Pezeshkian stated the US is after repeating the past patterns and betraying the diplomacy, referring to the US-Israeli war on Iran last June and February this year in the middle of negotiations. Also, Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi held a phone call with his Pakistani counterpart, Mohammad Ishaq Dar, about regional developments and ongoing fragile ceasefire, the ministry announced in a press release. He expressed appreciation for Pakistan's good offices and mediation efforts, but cited the bitter experience over the past year marked by repeated breaches of trust by Washington. Over the weekend, Parliament Speaker Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf, in an interview with the state IRIB TV, termed Tehran's 10-point plan as non-negotiable principles for the Iranian armed forces and diplomats. Ghalibaf led Iran's negotiators in the inconclusive talks with the US in Islamabad earlier this month. In the latest development, Iran's Khatam al-Anbiya central headquarters warned on Monday that it will soon respond to the armed maritime piracy after the US Navy fired on an Iranian cargo ship in the Gulf of Oman on Sunday. Turaj Shiralilu, Tehran, for A News.
Oil markets are reacting sharply to renewed tensions in the Gulf as uncertainty over supply and diplomacy drives volatility. With prices rebounding and global markets on edge, the focus is on how long disruption to key energy routes could last.
Oil prices rose sharply on Monday after falling more than 9% on Friday as tensions increased over the closure of the Strait of Hormuz and renewed US-Iran accusations over a ceasefire breach. Reports say US forces seized an Iranian vessel attempting to break a blockade, while Iran said it would not join further talks with Washington, despite US pressure. The US continues to block Iranian ports, and Iran has repeatedly imposed and lifted restrictions on the Strait of Hormuz, which handles around 1/5 of global oil flows. In Asia, both Brent and WTI also surged at the market open. Markets remain focused on the blockade and uncertainty over US-Iran talks. US futures fell over 0.5%, while gold and silver also declined. European stocks opened lower, with the stock SIX 600 down 0.8%.
Things are starting to get serious. We can manage with perhaps 2 months of a closed Strait of Hormuz. But after 3 or 4 months, things will start to get critical in terms of helium, kerosene, fuels in general, and also fertilizers. There's a stockpile in place, built up in advance because there was some anticipation that this war might break out. If it lasts too long, it will become problematic. The stock market isn't anticipating that yet. But if the collapse of the ceasefire suggests that things will escalate again, the markets are indeed unprepared for that.
Higher oil prices are also increasing pressure on European economies, especially those that rely heavily on energy imports. The Strait of Hormuz, through which around 20% of global energy flows, remains one of the main sources of tension in the region.
Investors want to put the Iran war behind them, want to look beyond these growth targets. They'll be scrutinizing the balance sheets very closely during earnings season to see how deep this downturn is. And can we really just ignore it? I think the whole thing will resolve itself through sector rotation. Investors want to stay invested, and there will be losers who are less able to adapt to situation. High energy prices, supply chain disruptions, some companies will be better able to adapt. And so investors are rotating slightly from one sector to another without this necessarily leading to a major correction at the index level.
Analysts say investors are trying to remain in the market despite the risks, with the main shifts taking place between sectors rather than across the broader indices.
Route 66 is marking a milestone this year, but rising fuel costs are threatening to take some of the shine off America's most famous road trip.
Route 66, the legendary Mother Road stretching from Chicago to Los Angeles, is turning 100 this year, with celebrations planned along its 2,400-mile route. But as the summer travel season approaches, soaring fuel prices are raising concerns for both travellers and the small businesses that depend on them. The spike is being driven in part by reduced traffic through the Strait of Hormuz, a key global oil and gas corridor, pushing up petrol costs across the United States. At roadside stops like Roy's Motel and Cafe in Amboy, California, the impact is already visible.
My concern is that it'll deter tourism overall. You know, if it's all of a sudden your travel expense becomes 20% more or something like that, that is a number people start looking at. A few pennies a gallon, 10 or 20 cents, I don't think most of us would scoff at that. But when it starts becoming dollars, that becomes a big deal.
Further east in Kingman, Arizona, home to the longest continuous stretch of the route, local officials remain optimistic, with major centennial celebrations still planned for later this year. But for travellers already on the road, the impact is immediate.
We're moving from Phoenix to our new home, and to fill up my truck is $175. Yeah, it's bad. So when we do choose little trips like this, we are much closer to home than we would normally go.
Some are shortening their trips, staying closer to home, or tightening budgets to cope with the rising cost of fuel. Others are adjusting how they travel altogether.
For us, that's where we spent most of our money so far. Other than that, we've been saving a lot. Haven't been stopping at a lot of the restaurants, just taking pictures. So I mean, we saved a lot of money there, knowing that the gas prices were going to be high. But it's not as bad as we thought it was going to be.
While higher prices may reshape the classic American road trip, for many, the pull of Route 66 still proves hard to resist.
I think either way, I mean, it's still worth it considering all of the history behind Route 66 in America. So I think no matter what, even if prices were still kind of continue to go, I mean, it would still be worth at least seeing a portion of it, even if you couldn't afford to do it all.
For businesses along the route, the hope is that the centennial celebrations will still draw the crowds, even if those road trips come with a higher price tag.
French President Emmanuel Macron met Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk in Gdansk on Monday for intergovernmental talks. It marks their first meeting since signing a treaty on enhanced cooperation last year, with discussions expected to include deeper military ties and potential nuclear deterrence cooperation. Discussions focused on bilateral cooperation and broader European security issues. A political earthquake in Bulgaria. Pro-Russian former President Rumen Radev is on course for a landslide victory in Sunday's snap parliamentary elections. With 96% of the ballots officially counted, his Progressive Bulgaria party is dominating with nearly 45% of the vote. The result is set to end years of severe political deadlock, but it's raising alarms in Western capitals over the country's future trajectory. Here's our report.
The election result crushes Bulgaria's established political order. Rumen Radev's sweeping win sidelines former Prime Minister Boyko Borisov's GERB party and the Liberal coalition, both trailing far behind at around 15%. It gives Radev a clear mandate to form a government, ending a crisis that saw 8 elections in just 5 years.
You should know that Bulgaria will pay efforts to continue its European path, but believe me, strong Bulgaria in strong Europe needs critical thinking, needs pragmatism, because Europe has fallen a victim to its own ambition to be a moral leader in a world without rules.
Radev stepped down from the presidency in January to run, riding a wave of mass protests against the previous government. Now, on the streets of Sofia, voters are torn between the promise of stability and the fear of a geopolitical pivot.
I'm very anxious because he is pro-Russian, as this might be very problematic, but I suppose the people won't let him do very major change regarding the geopolitical scene.
I believe in him. I see that he's he will do, not only talk. That's the most important thing in every topic, not only in political topic.
But it is that geopolitical shift that has international observers on edge. Radev strongly opposes military aid to Ukraine and campaigned on restoring Russian energy flows to Europe. In Moscow, the Kremlin was quick to welcome the prospect of a friendly face inside the EU and NATO.
We are, of course, encouraged by the words of Mr. Radev, who won the elections, as well as those of certain other European leaders, regarding their readiness to resolve issues through a pragmatic dialogue with the Russian Federation.
While the Kremlin says it's too early to declare a broader shift in the European climate, Radev's absolute majority gives him unprecedented power to reshape the foreign policy of a key nation on NATO's southeastern flank.
Hungary is entering a new political phase, with the incoming leadership moving quickly to outline sweeping reforms ahead of taking office. With a strong mandate and ambitious plans, attention is now on whether these changes can reshape the country's direction at home and in Europe.
Hungary is entering a new political phase, and Peter Magyar is setting a fast pace before his government is even sworn in the first week of May. His TISA party has presented a 100-day plan that aims to reshape how the state works from the ground up. A central part of the plan is the creation of new ministry for health, education, and environmental protection. The goal is to break up the current centralized system and give each sector clearer leadership and accountability. Healthcare is at the center of this push. Magyar has made it one of his top priorities, pointing to long wait times, staff shortages, and underfunding. His plan calls for higher wages for doctors and nurses and more resources for hospitals and a system where patients can expect more reliable care. At the same time, there is a strong economic and political goal behind these reforms. Magyar wants to unlock billions of European Union funds that have been frozen over concerns about corruption and rule of law. Those funds are seen as key to stabilizing the economy and supporting public services. There are already signs of movement. Talks between Hungary's incoming leadership and EU officials have begun, with both sides signaling a willingness to work together. But EU leaders have made it clear that real progress will depend on concrete changes, especially on transparency and oversight. Meanwhile, Magyar enters office with a strong mandate after a landslide election victory. His party holds two-thirds majority in parliament, which gives him the power to pass major reforms, including changes to the constitution if needed. That level of power brings high expectations. The timeline is short. The reforms are wide-ranging, and many Hungarians are watching to see if this new government can deliver on its promises and reset the country's direction at home and in Europe. Pablo Gutierrez for A News, Budapest, Hungary.
French prosecutors have summoned tech billionaire Elon Musk for voluntarily questioning as part of a criminal investigation into into his social media platform X and its AI chatbot Grok. The probe, launched in January 2025 by Paris cybercrime authorities, has been ongoing for more than a year and has expanded in scope. Initially focused on alleged algorithmic manipulation and misuse of user data, the investigation now includes concerns over the spread of AI-generated deepfakes, including sexually explicit content and material involving minors. Ukraine has signed 10-year defence export agreements with Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates and Qatar. Volodymyr Zelensky said in an interview with Ukraine's national telethon United News on Sunday. Zelensky mentioned that the agreements are part of a broader drone deal framework that will include at least 10 separate contracts covering export of Ukrainian weapons, joint production and manufacturing lines in Ukraine and abroad. The package also includes cooperation on jointly developed technologies funded by partner states. A strong earthquake off northeastern Japan has prompted tsunami warnings, with officials urging immediate evacuation from coastal areas as waves of up to 3 meters are expected. Here's the latest on the story.
A powerful earthquake struck off Japan's northeastern coast on Monday, triggering tsunami warnings and evacuation orders across multiple regions. The tremor hit at approximately 4:53 p.m. local time, with a preliminary magnitude of 7.7 according to the Japan Meteorological Agency. Its epicenter was located in the Pacific Ocean at a depth of around 10 kilometers. Shaking was widely felt, including in Tokyo, where buildings swayed as the quake registered an upper 5 on Japan's seismic intensity scale, strong enough to make movement difficult and cause structural damage to weaker buildings. Within minutes, authorities issued tsunami warnings for Iwate, Aomori, and Hokkaido prefectures, warning that waves of up to 3 meters could strike coastal areas.
Here in Miyako, a 0.4 meter tsunami was observed. A 0.8 meter tsunami was observed in Kuji Port in Iwate Prefecture. Tsunamis have also been observed in Erimo, Urakawa, and other locations in Aomori and Iwate prefectures. The warning is in effect for the central Pacific coast of Hokkaido, the Pacific coast of Aomori prefecture.
In the first hour after the quake, tsunami waves measuring up to 80 centimeters were already detected along parts of the coastline, with further surges expected. Evacuation orders were issued in several coastal towns, including Otsuchi and Kamaishi, areas still marked by the devastation of the 2011 disaster.
At this point, we have not received any reports of casualties or property damages, but I have been informed that the situation is still being assessed about damages. We will continue assessing the extent of the damage and be in close coordination with local governments, with the police, fire department, self-defense forces, and the Japan Coast Guard at the forefront. We will do our utmost to carry out emergency disaster response measures, prioritizing life-saving and rescue operations.
Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi confirmed that an emergency task force had been established and urged the public to follow evacuation guidance.
The government, immediately after the earthquake occurred, established an emergency liaison office at the Prime Minister's Office Crisis Management Centre. Based on my instructions, we are making our utmost to assess the extent of the damage, carry out emergency measures for disasters, including rescue operations, and provide timely and accurate information to the public.
Authorities also warned of strong aftershocks, with seismologists assessing possible links to activity along the Japan or Kuril trenches, despite the scale of the quake. Officials reported no immediate casualties or major damage as of the first hours following the event.
We'll take a short break now. When we return, we'll discuss the strategic implications of sanctions policy and what the latest developments may signal about the direction of Western support for Ukraine. Stay tuned. Welcome back to A News. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has criticized the United States' decision to extend a sanctions waiver, allowing transactions involving Russian energy to continue, warning the move risks undermining pressure on Moscow. The waiver, linked to maintaining stability in global energy markets, highlights the ongoing tension between economic realities and political efforts to isolate Russia over the war in Ukraine. Kyiv has consistently called for stronger sanctions enforcement, arguing that any easing of pressure could prolong the conflict by enabling continued Russian revenues. Now let's bring in our guest, Dmytro Kavun. He's president at Dignitas Ukraine, joining us live from New York, United States. Dmitry, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm actually in Washington, D.C. today, but it's good to be here.
Oh, beg your pardon. Thanks for correcting us, by the way. So let's start with the more obvious question. Why does Kyiv view the US decision to extend a sanctions waiver involving Russian energy transactions as a move potentially undermining pressure on Moscow?
Well, let's think about what the oil exports mean for Russia. This is the main revenue stream for Russia that they rely on. And these are ways how Russia fuels its war against Ukraine. Suspending these sanctions is essentially increasing that revenue stream, which will, in short to medium term, will boost Russia's ability to scale up the attacks, to have more cash to spend on the war in Ukraine. And Russia has not communicated that they want to stop attacking Ukraine. Actually, the other way around, they've recently mentioned that Russia is not interested in the peace talks. That's not the priority for them.
Now, the waiver suggests concerns about global energy market stability, especially with what's happening in Iran on that front. How difficult is it for Western policymakers to balance economic factors with strategic pressure on Russia?
That is a very good point, is that what's happening in Iran is affecting the global energy markets. However, this is exactly how it plays to the hand of Russia, is the higher oil price, higher ability for Russia to continue the attack and continue attacking, potentially attacking other countries. Unfortunately, it's a tough choice that will need to be made to make sure that the global energy markets are not, the pressure on the global energy markets are eased, but not at the cost of Russia's ability to sell more oil to the world. If the world, and these are, short-term versus longer terms issues that we need to address. But if we let Russia off the hook in respect with having them higher revenue stream for oil, they will, in the longer term, continue their imperialism and the war in Ukraine, killing more civilians in that. So there has to be bigger perspective on making sure that we're not enabling Russia and by easing these sanctions, while at the same time, we have to work collaboratively with other countries to make sure that the global supply is maintained and is not causing the world economic consequences.
And the United States has remained one of Ukraine's key supporters. How might this disagreement affect perceptions of Western unity?
It certainly may come to that. The differences of opinions in political world is not something uncommon in that respect. But these are these are more tactical kind of questions that I am sure the political leaders will look to resolve. Right? There's obvious aspect of Ukraine is standing strong in the fact that Russia needs to be stopped by all means possible, and Ukraine is doing its part in stopping and show that the best way to stop Russia is by from producing more oil. And Ukraine has been performing those long-range of Russia, which seem to be a very good job in bringing Russia to the table of discussions in that sense.
Okay, Dmytro, one last question. Ukraine has called for stronger international coordination on sanctions enforcement. Are we seeing signs of fatigue among Western partners?
Yes, there may be that perception that there is fatigue, but there's nothing new. Sanctions have existed for a long time against Russia and other countries as well. So I would say that maintaining sanctions is a critical aspect to put the pressure to do the right thing, against Russian aggression and enabling its imperialist ambitions. And I understand that some people or some countries, do not. They're more for open markets, but there definitely needs to be a moral aspect here, is that we're not dealing with terrorists, we're not dealing with countries that violate international law, and we stand strong on that.
Okay, Dmytro, thank you so much for joining us on the program, for your analysis and time. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for having me.
Now, after the break, we'll take a look at the key stories shaping the region. Welcome back to A News. China is strengthening energy ties with Turkmenistan through a major new gas field project aimed at boosting long-term cooperation and regional energy security. For more, we go to Mahnur Maktoum.
China and Turkmenistan are advancing a new phase of energy cooperation with the groundbreaking of the fourth stage of the Galkanish gas field, the world's largest natural gas reserve. Chinese Vice Premier Ding Xuexiang said that the project will elevate bilateral energy ties to a new level, highlighting the strength of the comprehensive strategic partnership between the two countries. Ding and Turkmen President Sardar Berdimuhamedov jointly initiated drilling operations via video link and attended a foundation link ceremony, highlighting the high-level commitment to the project. The two leaders also visited an exhibition of advanced oil and gas equipment, showcasing the role of modern technology in supporting development. The new phase is expected to expand production capacity and strengthen long-term gas supply cooperation, building on decades of successful collaboration that has supported economic growth and improved livelihoods in both countries. Manin Maktoum, A News, Beijing.
Energy cooperation between Uzbekistan and Tajikistan is gaining momentum as both countries look to expand ties in key industrial sectors. A News' Sevil Rajapova has more from Tashkent.
Uzbekistan and Tajikistan are deepening energy cooperation following talks between Uzbekneftgaz and the Tajik delegation, where both sides agreed to expand collaboration in the oil and gas sector. The discussions focused on boosting industrial ties, increasing economic cooperation, and unlocking new opportunities in energy development. The parties described their relationship as a strategic partnership built on mutual trust and long-standing cooperation. Tajik representatives expressed interest in the Uzbek products and emphasized the importance of market-based mechanisms in developing bilateral economic relations. As a result, an agreement was reached to strengthen cooperation not only in oil and gas, but also across border industrial sectors. The latest step builds on growing high-level engagement between the two countries. In March, President Shavkat Mirziyoyev and President Emomali Rahmon held the first meeting of the Supreme Interstate Council, setting a target to increase bilateral trade to $2 billion by 2030 and expand cooperation in energy and infrastructure. Energy remains a key pillar of this partnership. Uzbekistan has already been supplying electricity to Tajikistan, with deliveries reaching up to 2 million kilowatt-hours per day to help address energy shortages. Officials say these volumes could increase further as Uzbekistan expands its generation capacity and strengthens its role as a regional energy exporter. It is Sevil Rajapova reporting from Tashkent, Uzbekistan, A News.
Kazakhstan is ramping up oil and gas exploration as output from existing fields declines. A News correspondent reports from Almaty.
Kazakhstan is stepping up large-scale oil and gas exploration as its existing fields continue to decline. At the national oil and gas company Kazmunaygaz, leading geologists and industry experts have been reviewing a new 5-year exploration program aimed at rebuilding the country's resource base. After analyzing vast amounts of geological and geophysical data, the company has identified 23 projects at different stages of development with a combined potential of up to 65 billion tons of oil equivalent. The plan focuses heavily on seismic studies, both 2D and 3D, along with geochemical surveys and exploratory drilling to better understand what lies below the surface. One of the key areas is the pre-salt layer of the Caspian Basin. A major seismic campaign is planned here, covering around 60,000 kilometers. These are deep and technically complex structures, but they are also seen as the most promising for new discoveries. Experts say moving into new territories and deeper horizons is now unavoidable as mature oil fields are gradually running out. Large-scale exploration is becoming critical for the country's long-term energy security. Earlier this year, authorities announced that around $470.8 million will be invested over the next 3 years to support these projects, as well as seismic exploration in underexplored sedimentary basins and the development of modern geological infrastructure. To put that into perspective, this nearly matches the total amount invested in exploration over the past 15 years. Hariza Kalimurzina, Almaty, A News.
Azerbaijan has summoned the ambassadors of Belgium and the Netherlands over parliamentary texts it says undermines its sovereignty and the peace process with Armenia. Azerbaijan's foreign ministry says the ambassadors of Belgium and the Netherlands were summoned today over documents adopted by their parliaments on the 16th of April. Baku said the texts contained false claims, showed anti-Azerbaijani bias, and interfered in its sovereignty, territorial integrity and legal affairs. The ministry also rejected allegations related to Armenia's territorial integrity, the rights of ethnic Armenians and the detention of people of Armenian origin. Azerbaijan chaired the 82nd session of the United Nations Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific in Bangkok, with Ceyhun Bayramov leading the meeting. The session brought together regional leaders to discuss inclusive development, economic growth and cooperation, with Azerbaijan highlighting its Azerbaijan 2030 priorities. A key outcome was the adoption of the Baku-Bangkok Declaration on Social Development. At the opening, Ceyhun Bayramov stressed Azerbaijan's commitment to sustainable development and cooperation.
Azerbaijan, situated at the crossroads of East and West, has long attached strategic importance to connectivity. The Middle Corridor is one of the key routes contributing to regional cooperation and resilience. In the period ahead, investing in sustainable transport, efficient logistics and modern infrastructure across our wider region should remain part of our common vision so that no country is left outside the map of trade, exchange and opportunity.
Armenia's defense minister has met NATO's special representative in Yerevan for talks on cooperation and broader security issues. Armenian Defence Minister Suran Papikyan held talks on Monday with Kevin Hamilton, NATO Secretary-General's Special Representative for the Caucasus and Central Asia. Hamilton was appointed to the role in March. Armenia's Defence Ministry said the meeting covered cooperation with NATO as well as regional and international security issues. Armenia's Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan says business links with Azerbaijan could soon help secure lasting peace. Speaking about his civil contract party's election program, he said the process of institutionalizing peace is already underway. Pashinyan pointed to a legally binding agreement between Armenia and Azerbaijan on border delimitation. Armenian Prime Minister also outlined continued border work, advance the TRIP transport project and sign a final peace treaty as next steps. He added that trade, civil society contacts and cultural dialogue will also play a key role in building long-term stability between the two countries. Signs of renewed engagement are emerging between Washington and Tbilisi following a high-level call aimed at restarting dialogue. After a period of strained relations, attention is now on whether this shift can lead to a more substantive reset. A News' Nini Nikolashvili takes a closer look.
The Speaker of the Georgian Parliament, Shalva Papuashvili, says a recent phone call between Marco Rubio and Prime Minister Irakli Kobakhidze reflects a mutual readiness to restore relations. According to Papuashvili, the mid-April conversation focused on restarting dialogue and moving toward concrete steps, although no dates for official visits have yet been agreed. The timing of the call has drawn attention. It comes after a prolonged period of strained relations marked by reduced high-level communication and increasingly critical rhetoric from both sides. Georgian officials have blamed tensions on disagreements with the previous U.S. administration, while U.S. representatives and international observers have raised concerns about political developments in Georgia. including governance issues and democratic standards. At the same time, the call coincides with broader geopolitical developments. The ongoing tensions surrounding Iran and the wider regional security environment have increased the strategic importance of the regions like the South Caucasus. While neither Washington nor Tbilisi has officially linked their renewed contacts to these developments, analysts note that the periods of instability often prompt renewed diplomatic engagement. This shift comes in contrast to earlier years when Georgia was widely seen as Washington's closest partner in the region following the 2009 Strategic Partnership Agreement. More recently, however, the United States has expanded its engagement with Armenia and Azerbaijan, while ties with Tbilisi became less active. Adding to the dynamic, newly aligned Georgian opposition groups have also announced planned visits to the United States, signaling parallel political outreach. For now, both sides emphasize readiness for dialogue. Whether this moment leads to a substantive reset or remains limited to diplomatic signaling will depend on the next steps. Nini Nikolaishvili, Tbilisi, A News.
We'll take a short break now. When we return, we'll continue to discuss the potential reset in relations between Georgia and the United States and what renewed engagement could mean for regional stability. We'll see you shortly. Welcome back to A News. Now let's bring in our guest. Ms. Mariam Kintsurashvili joins us. She's a security expert joining us from Valencia, Spain. Mariam, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Dilek. Thank you for having me.
Now, Georgia faces long-standing issues with Europe. So how important is it for them to reset relations, as the Georgian Parliament Speaker Shalva Papuashvili put it, with the United States?
Well, it's vitally important for Georgia to reset the relations, and not only because it will be the reset of bilateral U.S.-Georgia relations that have been damaged for almost 2 years now, but also because it will serve as a proxy that will shape Georgia and return Georgia to its role of a credible Western allied partner. So, of course, this is important. However, any discussion of any reset should always concentrate over the fact that the damage in the relations itself, the rupture, happened not because of miscommunication or poor communication with the U.S. administration. It happened because of Georgia Dream's own actions. It was purely self-inflicted. And although Georgian Dream propaganda internally tries to convey that there was some poor miscommunication with the previous administration, this is not completely true. Georgian Dream repeatedly was engaged in a very hostile rhetoric against the US and our Western partners, and increasingly aligned when it comes to foreign affairs with the adversaries of the US, including Iran and China. At the same time, internally, we witnessed the democratic backsliding, and instead of just improving the situation, the government is doubling down, and we see it internally happening in Georgia on the 509th day of protest today.
The United States suspended elements of its strategic partnership with Georgia in recent years, as you also underlined there. How significant is a potential reset for the geopolitical balance in the South Caucasus? I know you emphasised the bilateral relations aspect, but let's look at the geopolitical balance in the region.
For the geopolitical balance, the genuine reset, not just the visibility tactics and PR, which Georgian Dream is now implying, would be extremely important. Although, like with all the strategic developments in the region, Georgia has lost its central leverage in the region. However, it would be very beneficial to the United States and our Western partners as with the old geopolitical developments in the region, they stopped viewing South Caucasus as some peripheral geographical location, and it's becoming more and more central. As of now, I don't really see that reset is happening, as the despite the rhetoric of Papuashvili and the representatives of Georgian Dream, the U.S. story is quite thin. The only readout we got from the State Department is that they had a short call where Kobakhidze and Marco Rubio discussed mutual areas of interest, and mainly Black Sea and South Caucasus security. So we don't know how far they've gone, how deep they've gone in these discussions.
Now, Georgian officials have spoken about creating a new content-rich framework for cooperation. What might this look like in practical policy terms?
If this phrase really means anything serious, it should be really content-rich, and the framework should be quite large. So here we would talk about the regional security in the Black Sea region and the South Caucasus, the maritime awareness, transport routes, following the sanctions, critical infrastructure security, cybersecurity. So if it were really to happen, it would, of course, enlarge the previously existing strategic partnerships framework, and certainly it would benefit the region in the geopolitical realities that we are now. So we shall have to see what happens next, and how a lot will depend on the Georgian Dream government and how willing they are to move just from tactical PR moves of local internal propaganda to real meaningful steps to restoring these relationships.
And Mariam, Speaker of the Grand National Assembly of Turkey, Numan Kurtulmuş, proposed to include Armenia in the Turkey-Georgia-Azerbaijan format, a proposal Alan Simonyan has welcomed. Would this diminish the role of Georgia in that format?
Well, I wouldn't say it would diminish or eliminate Georgia's role in the format. But as I said previously, the strategic developments in the region have already diminished the purely geographical role of Georgia as a bridge in the region. So Georgia's role in South Caucasus was always stood on three main strengths. One was the highly functional relationship between Turkey and Azerbaijan and Georgia. The second one was pure geography. And the third one was that Georgia was consistently regarded as the most reliable, consistent pro-Western state in the region. So here I would say we have three possible outcomes. One is that the broadening of the East-West corridor, the expansion of the East-West corridor, and broadening of the relations would even benefit Georgia, because Georgia would become a part of this balance and serve as a reliable connector, and overall peace and stability in the region would benefit Georgia economically. But this is only if the government acts in an intelligent way. The second one, we've always observed Georgia as a diplomatic leverage carrier in the region. So this role might diminish a little bit, but still it will depend a lot on the third outcome, which would be Georgia's credibility in the region. For now, politically, Georgia is unstable. It sends mixed signals to the West about its Euro-Atlantic aspiration, about its strategic partnerships with the adversaries of the West, about its increasing alliance with Russia. So if Georgia manages to restore this credibility and stand on the stable path, then this is possible, I think. But I don't agree that it will diminish Georgia's role, but certainly it will not be Georgia-centric anymore as it used to be for 20 years before.
Okay, Mariam, thank you so much for joining us on the program today. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you very much, Dilek.
And that's the news for this hour. Stay tuned to A News for all the latest developments.